Hello everyone, my name is Chad McDonald. What we're going to be doing today is fastening this drywall that's already been placed. So our performance objective is given a screw gun, 1¼ drywall screws. The students will be able to fasten a sheet of drywall to metal studs step by step according to the manufacturer's guidelines and meet the quality specifications of the manufacturers. So before we get started doing anything though, we want to ensure we're working safely. So we want to make sure we put on our Z87 stamp safety glasses. So with that said, we'll go to step one. Our first step is to inspect drywall for proper placement. And the key points in this step are you want to look at what the manufacturer recommends first of all. And then next is inspect the seams for the drywall to ensure that all the gaps are less than 1/8 of an inch. And if the seams of the drywall exceed 1/8 of an inch, it may be necessary to pre-fill these gaps. So what does that mean? We want to go through here and inspect all the perimeter and where all of our sheets of drywall are placed together. We want to ensure that that gap's less than 1/8 of an inch. Now, if that gap's more than 1/8 of an inch, then we're going to have to pre-fill that before we can actually finish it and tape and mud it, and that's a later procedure. So we want to inspect it first. So we look at this one right here, this joint right here will need to be pre-filled, so we want to ensure that and keep that in mind when we come back. So our next step is preparing the screw gun. So I'm going to tack this up here so I can use both of my hands. But before we do any fastening of the drywall, we want to inspect our screw gun. The one that we're using today is a DeWalt screw gun. And it don't matter what manufacturer, this is just the one I have, but we want to make sure it's in proper working order. So I'm just going to do a quick visual inspection, look for major cracks, dents, dings, scrapes, nicks, cuts, and that. So you really want to inspect the cord really well because it's happened to me, I'll be honest, where I've went through and there was been a mild nick and it's hit me and it stung me. That's not fun. So we want to inspect all the cord really well. We also want to pick up our extension cord, and I've done this prior to us doing this video, but I want to make sure that all this has been inspected too, inch by inch. Make sure there's no nicks, dents, cracks, or anything in that also on your extension cord. So after I do all the inspection on my screw gun and on my cords, I'm ready to plug it in, and we're ready to place that first screw. So I'll plug it in here. Ensure we got power. We have power. So now the next step is to place our first screw. So to do that, we're going to lock our screw gun on, and there's a locking switch right here in the handle. Only thing you do is pull the trigger, and you lock it on, and we'll place our first screw. So I'll pull the trigger, lock it on go, and we're going to place our first screw. So we placed our first screw. Now we want to ensure that we set it to the right depth because we don't want to continue screwing this wall off and fastening it if the screw depth's not right, because that'll cause you problems when you go to finishing the drywall. So what I'm looking for is when I come and look at my screw here is I want to ensure that I have the right depth. And the right depth, until you get really used to this, it can be confusing at times, but trust me, you'll get this. So we want to make sure, first of all, it's countersunk past the surface of the drywall itself. So it's just slightly dimpled in. So for instance, a good way to check that is if I run my hammer across at the face of it, if I don't hear anything clicking, that's pretty good depth. But if I hear this noise, that means it's past the surface of my drywall and it's going to cause problems later on when we go to finishing it. So, with that said, my screw up here is not too bad, but what's causing it, we also don't want it to break the paper of the drywall, because that means it's set too deep. And for instance, this one is, so what we need to do is adjust our drywall gun, and we do that here with the nose cone. And we'll turn this counter or clockwise a few clicks, and that'll bring out the screw so it maybe not tear the paper. So I'm going to do that a few clicks. And we're going to go back to our last step, turn on our screw gun, we're going to place our next screw. Then we'll check the depth again. Okay, we did a few adjustments, but we want to go back to the last step to ensure that we have the proper depth. Okay, as we talked about before, we can just check it until you get really used to it. We'll run our hammer. Okay, there's our screw right there. Nope, it's not clicking, so that it's got the proper depth. That way. Okay, but we also want to make sure it's not too deep. So I want to do it visually inspect, make sure it's not tearing the paper. And it's not tearing the paper. So we're good to go. So now what we could do is get ready, fill our pouches up full of screws, and we're ready to finish fastening off this drywall. And we'll talk about that in our next segment. Thank you.